China has won in EVs, but here is what the rest of the world can do. Hello everyone, I'm your host Toby and welcome back to the China EV show. Before we get started, don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. Now today I'd like to talk about the anxiety that a lot of Western and actually non-Chinese brands are facing in regards to EVs. As we know, last year China overtook Japan as the largest exporter of vehicles. While many of these are ICE, there are still an increasing number of EVs going global as the Chinese market gets more saturated and brands look overseas for their next customers. The flood of Chinese EVs into places like Europe has got a lot of people worried and caused some protectionist governments to bring in some trade restrictions. In Europe, we have an anti-subsidy probe looking at Chinese EVs, which may result in higher taxes and Chinese EVs being exempt from any extra subsidies in Europe. And the basis for this is that the EU governments are saying Chinese EVs are artificially low because of all the help they've got from their government. Chinese automotive executives are pushing back against what they think is Western protectionism, saying it's a double standard. Chinese brands let these Western brands into China many years ago. Okay, it was under the guise of a JV, but nonetheless, they have made massive profits from the China market for decades. And actually, in some cases, the China market has been their biggest market for a length of time. So Western brands have been getting rich off China for some years. When Chinese brands come to Europe with competitive products, why are they not allowed to enjoy the benefit of their forward thinking? China has been successful, invested well, and poured resources into the EV industry. Other brands cannot compete with what they offer. But the answer is not to restrict Chinese EVs. This will just slow down EV adoption rates at a time when Europe is trying to outlaw the ICE, the combustion engine, by 2035. So put quite simply, these European governments are seeing these Chinese EVs coming to Europe and they're saying these EVs are priced too cheaply. Our brands cannot compete. We have to increase tariffs, we have to increase taxes to make our products more competitive. For me, that seems like a flawed logic and it's not going to help EV adoption rates in Europe. So what can be done about this? In very much the same way that China forced foreign brands to set up a JV with Chinese companies many years ago when they came to China, something similar could be done in Europe, whereas European brands rebrand Chinese products with their own marks. We've already seen some type of intentions of this with Leapmotor and Stellantis rebadging Leapmotor vehicles and selling them in Europe, and also the same with VW and XPeng potentially rebadging the XPeng vehicles as VW vehicles and selling them to European consumers. This is kind of like a marriage of both, where Chinese hardware, European branding come together to give consumers great products in a package that they can accept. Of course, we've also seen Chinese brands buying European brands and having great success with this. Geely with Volvo, with Polestar, with Lotus, and then we have SAIC with MG. And these brands, although Chinese owned, because they're branded in a way Europeans can accept, are doing very well now in terms of sales. What do you think? Do you think this is a good idea, having a Chinese hardware, European branding, and bringing them to Europe? Is that a good idea? Let us know in the comments below. Next, I'd like to talk about better and more sincere incentives for consumers. I had to take my own country for an example here, which is the UK. And I know there are a couple of schemes. They have the salary sacrifice scheme where you can get the cost of the vehicle taken from your pre-tax salary, which is very nice of them. But what about if you don't have a stable job? What about if you're retired? What about if you don't want to work? These benefits do not apply to these individuals. They're only good for people who have a stable job. And the other thing I'd like to talk about is road tax. I found that in the first year, EV drivers, EV car owners can get a very cheap road tax rate of £10. But then after that, it goes up to a standard rate of £180. For me, this is a very short-sighted and very insincere way to encourage EV growth. To add to this, the UK government, I'm bashing the UK a lot today, but I have to bash them because it's my country, falling behind with infrastructure. They're not building as many chargers as they say they were going to be. They said there's going to be superchargers in all the service stations around the country, and they are not meeting their goals. So how can people put their faith in EVs if the government does not? That is a big problem. Viewers from the UK, I understand that EV adoption rates are quite good, but tell me if you think that the government are doing enough or what else they could do to encourage adoption rates in the UK. And elsewhere around the world, let us know what your government's doing and if you think it is good or bad or what else they can do to encourage EV adoption. Leave your comments in the section below. The final point I'd like to talk about today relates to this anti-subsidy probe that's going on with Chinese brands. I'm pretty sure they will come up with that they were given loads of subsidies by the governments. Everyone knows this. That's why their cars are so competitive. The question is not, are Chinese brands receiving subsidies from the government? The question is, why aren't you doing more for your brands? Why isn't your government being more proactive in giving assistance to these brands, to the consumers, to everyone at every level? As in China, The cars are cheap because the stipends come at all levels. They don't just start at giving consumers a discount. Electric vehicle companies get benefits on energy, on infrastructure, on taxes, at kind of every level, which trickles down to creating great prices for consumers. Unfortunately, a lot of these stipends are kind of like 2 or 3 year return rates. They're not something you can just do overnight. But like I said, hopefully it's not too late for some of these brands to increase their competitiveness. The answer isn't Chinese brands are too cheap, let's make them more expensive. The answer is European brands are more expensive. Let's find as many ways as possible to make them cheap and more competitive for consumers. Let us know if you think I'm a bit of a wishful thinker, or any other comments you have in the section below. I've been Toby, this has been the China EV Show. See you next time, goodbye.